bună ziua, bine ați venit la emisiunea Ora de Risc, o ediție dedicată pensiilor private. Transmisia noastră de la FIAR din Sinaia îl are astăzi ca oaspete pe domnul Jens Stinga, care este Legal Advisor al Federației Europene a Operatorilor din Fondurile Private. Hello, Mr. Stinga, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Daniela.
You are for the first time in Romania, but your FP was represented in our events for more than once. Please let us remind to our viewers a little bit who's your association and how many people is representing.
Okay. So I am a legal advisor at the European Federation for Retirement Provision. Our secretariat is in Brussels, in Belgium, and we have 22 pension fund associations as our member. One of them is the APR from Romania, who joined us in 2009. So our 22 associations represent some 3.7 trillion euros in pension assets. And we, through our associations, we provide pension benefits for millions of Europeans, both in EU countries and some non-EU countries also, including Switzerland and Croatia, for example.
So far as I understand, your work it's mostly related with almost everything that is private pensions in Europe.
Yes.
In a way or another.
It's workplace pensions, so we are the voice for workplace pensions, the leading voice for workplace pensions in Europe. But that is, and we also are a voice for a broader scope of private pensions, including the Romanian system, for example.
Yeah. The pensions industry had, as all the financial industries across the world, not a very good time in the years that have passed. And I assume that following this experience, we can draw some lessons. Let's say the crisis lessons for pensions. Which would be the main aspects or the main lesson that we have learned from this?
Well, pension funds, of course, suffered during the crisis. There's no denying that. At the same time, it looks like pension funds did not contribute to the crisis. We were not at the origin of the crisis, because pension funds do not borrow money. They are long-term investors, so they don't go to the markets and engage in some of the things that caused the crisis, such as speculative behavior. Pension funds are in it for the long term, and so in general it can be said that they displayed anti-cyclical behavior. That doesn't mean, of course, that everything was perfect. There is, of course, a need for pension funds to be transparent, towards their members and also towards their supervisors, to have their governance in order, so that there can be no errors, no mistakes. I think those are important lessons. What you can see then is, as a reaction, the European Union has undertaken a lot of initiatives to try to regulate financial markets more closely. So they want to regulate the banks and the insurers and the pension funds. So there's a regulatory reaction from the EU, if you wish. So that is something that we have to face now.
This brings us to the subject of your presentation today, and maybe it would be well if you could reiterate a little the main aspects of the changes ahead across Europe. Probably some of them will be also interesting for our pension system in a way or another.
Yes. So let me start with an important document that the European Commission published in February of this year. That's the white paper on pensions. And that's a document that sets out the agenda that the European Commission is going to follow in pensions policy in the next few years. The European Union, of course, doesn't have the power to regulate pension funds or pension promises or pension benefits in the member states, because that's sovereignty of the member states. But there are many ways in which the European Union can influence pension funds. So one of those ways is through the internal market for supplementary pension funds. The IORP directive regulates that. It regulates, it sets some certain minimum standards for occupational pension funds, and it regulates their cross-border activities. And there are other ways in which the European Union can influence pensions. So the white paper, the agenda for pensions, contains 20 proposals where the European Union wants to basically alleviate the burden on the public finances. So the white paper announces a number of ways in which the Commission wants the member states to reform their public pension systems. And the white paper also proposes a number of directives and initiatives to try to stimulate supplementary pensions. And so for us here, that's an interesting part in the white paper, of course, because it clearly says that Europeans will have to rely on supplementary pensions more in the future than they did in the past. So the European Union is going to try to further do what it can to further develop these private pensions. And so there are a number of things in the pipeline. One of the more important initiatives is this IORP directive, the directive that regulates institutions for occupational retirement provision. This is not a big issue in Romania, which has a mandatory pension system, but it is important for some of our other member associations in Holland and the UK, for example. But the lesson that's important to learn for Romania is that supplementary pensions must develop, because in Romania, as in other member countries, the state can no longer, it no longer has the budget to pay all the public pensions.
Yes, the estimations for the future are quite bad in this respect. But how much do you think people are aware of this reality?
Well, it turns out that Europeans are perhaps not as much aware of the implications of aging as they should be. There was a survey among Europeans that was published by the European Union in February of this year, and it says that only 40% of Europeans are aware of aging and the problems or the impact that it might have. So I think there's a big effort to be made by the member states' governments to give financial education to their citizens, to explain to them how they are going to be affected by the pension reforms, how more of the risks are being shifted from the state to the pension funds or even the individuals themselves. So there's a big role, a big responsibility also, to financially educate the people, and for the people also to inform themselves and to become more aware. This is the case in Romania, but also in other member countries.
Do you think that the mandatory or imposing a mandatory private pension system could be the solution to overcome this lack of awareness and to ensure a better coverage of the population in terms of pension, maybe?
Yes, it's certainly an important step. At the EFRP, we promote good pensions. So we're not saying that one system is better than the other, because we have a wide variety of pension systems in all the member countries, so we cannot say this one is better than that one, because every system is based on traditions and culture. But I think what we're seeing more and more is, people are going to rely on, different sources of their pension. So one part is the state pension, one part is mandatory or voluntary or quasi-mandatory workplace-related pension, and then a part of it is individual retirement savings. So all three of them are going to play a role, and I think it's very important in a country like Romania that a mandatory pension system gets more support and becomes consolidated so that it can contribute to delivering good pensions. It's not the only way, but it's an important step.
Yes, of course. Here, one of the main critical opinions about the mandatory system was related simply to the fact that it's mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
Some were saying that you should decide for yourself if you want to get enrolled in the pension system or not. But after all, mandatory pensions are the cheapest form with the lowest cost for the participants. And of course, they're assuring the right degree of coverage closer to the right one.
Mm-hmm.
Because whether you are conscient or not, you need to save, you have to do it anyway, finally. Do you think there is a possibility? 1 year or 2 years ago, we were hearing from time to time that the old pension markets, as the UK one or maybe other Western states, were thinking even to apply somehow a form of mandatory savings for pension. Is there a possibility to see such things?
Yes, and it takes the form not of a mandatory system, but of what they call an auto-enrollment system. This is what we're seeing in the United Kingdom right now. What we saw in the United Kingdom was that the state pensions were perhaps not as generous as people would want it to be. And then the top-up pensions, they can be good or bad, but they perhaps did not cover as many people as it could. So the UK government is now quite far advanced in introducing an auto-enrollment system. It's not the same as mandatory. It means that people join unless they opt out.
Oh, yeah.
But it's very important, I think, and this is something that the EFRP is working on and also finds very important, that coverage is extended to as many people as possible. So the fact of having a mandatory system or an auto-enrollment system, I cannot judge that case by case, but in generally we would think that yes, it's good, because as I said a few moments ago, public pensions are going to be reduced because of the pressure on state budgets, so something will have to step in, and it has to make sure that it covers as many people as possible. Yeah.
There are many discussions lately. On one hand, we are talking about safety and cost effectiveness and transparency. On the other hand, all the measures that we are taking in order to assure these characteristics shouldn't be a financial burden for the participants, because finally somebody has to pay for it. Where do you think should be the right balance in between satisfying the larger requirements and also the financial requirements? Or
Okay, that's a difficult one. That's a difficult question to respond to. I think you're absolutely right. Pension funds have to provide pensions and they have to deliver on their promises.
Yeah.
So it's very important for them to be appropriately regulated because people expect things from them. On the other hand, exactly, you don't want pension funds to be too costly, and you don't want pension funds to have to comply with a lot of regulations that cost them money to implement or these kinds of things. So it's a delicate balance to find between security on the one hand and the security of pensions, and on the other hand, providing the transparency and complying with all the regulation that's out there. So the bottom line is, yes, pensions have to be safe, they have to be adequate, and they have to be cost effective as well. And one thing that's for sure is that pension funds are a very cost effective way of saving for your pension. In general, saving through a pension fund is a more effective way for a person to save than through bank saving or insurance saving. So,
in the long run, for sure.
In the long run, for sure, yeah. And
So
we can see in Romania that the pension fund industry is still very young. Of course, it was set up in 2008. And you can see that it still needs to be consolidated, it needs support, and it needs strengthening in order to face some of the risks that this young system is still facing. So,
in your association, I think the Central and Eastern European markets should have something like a special place, because they are running very much different systems, pension systems, than the Western ones. How are you dealing with these differences?
One of the things that we did within the EFRP was to set up in 2007 a CEEC forum within our association. So that means that we provide a platform for our member associations from Central and Eastern Europe, but also for non-member associations, so from countries where we have no member associations, to discuss issues of common concern to the region. And it helps us, the EFRP, to voice those concerns in Brussels. So, for example, we try to represent the Central and Eastern European associations, and this was the case when Hungary nationalized its second pension pillar. We spoke up very strongly and unitedly against that. So yes, we do try to give a place to the specificities of the CEC systems.
Yeah, unfortunately, in the case of Hungary, it was unsuccessful finally. But on the other hand, when the Romanian system was threatened, you were successful in helping it to succeed in overpassing these threats. What do you think, finally, as my final questions, is there a possibility to see further adverse developments in this respect? Or maybe the experience we already have from some countries are enough enlightening for politicians in order to respect the pension system, the private pension system, and don't threaten it anymore? Just a guess.
Yes, I think there are probably two important things to remember. One is it's clear from what the European Union has been saying in the white paper that I mentioned earlier, in the Aging Report 2012 that is just published last week, that it's inevitable that public pensions are going to play a smaller role and supplementary pensions are going to play a bigger role. So supplementary pensions are almost inevitable. So we're going to have to live with that. And I know that, in some quarters there is still skepticism about the role of supplementary pensions. Sometimes for justified and sometimes for unjustified reasons. But, everybody has his own reasons. So the second thing is, what I seem to understand from the Romanian pension system is there's quite a high degree of political risk. Like the young pension system here still needs to find the stability and the long-term outlook, and it still needs to have the support. So I cannot, of course, give any predictions, but I hope it will find its feet, and I hope that, for example, you can build some more support for the system through involving the social partners. This is something that we do in Brussels at our EFRP Secretariat. We often work with the European social partners to voice our concerns towards the European Union institutions, because employers in many member states, they sponsor pension funds, supplementary pension funds, and often the employers and the worker representatives are on the boards of these pension funds. So European social partners have very much to gain and to defend when it comes to supplementary pensions. So perhaps that is something that could be worked on here in Romania as well, to try to involve the social partners in one way or the other. Of course, the Romanian system has its own specificities, but I think it could gain a lot from trying to bring in the social partners. And that means that they would have to build up expertise, but that can be done, of course. The European Union is also now making funds available for some of the things that we talked about today. They're making funds available for initiatives to increase coverage of supplementary pensions. They're making funds available to the member states, and I believe also to the social partners, to come up with ways to increase the safety and the performance and the coverage of pension funds. So there's definitely a lot to gain, yeah.
Well, let's hope all this will work and will be successful. Thank you very much, Mr. Thinga. I hope it is not the last time we are seeing you in Romania. Vă mulțumim și dumneavoastră pentru atenție și vă așteptăm la alte ediții ale emisiunii Ora de Risc.